Support for NPR comes from Cancer Treatment Centers of America, where treatment options include targeted therapies guided by genomic testing and immunotherapies that use the body's immune system to help fight the cancer. More at cancercenter.com.
Welcome to Pop Culture Happy Hour. I'm Linda Holmes. I'm the editor of NPR's pop culture and entertainment blog, Monkey See. We have been on a field trip here in New York, and we are talking to some people that we thought it would be fun to ask about their current pop culture preoccupations. I'm in the studio right now at NPR in New York with Danielle Henderson. Danielle is a culture writer whose work you may have seen in Vulture or The Guardian, or, I'm going to take a deep breath, Elle or Rookie or Fusion or BuzzFeed or Cosmo or The New York Times. And not for nothing, she's the originator of the Tumblr feminist Ryan Gosling and the author of the book of the same name. She does so much stuff that I like that I once referenced her interview with Effie Brown of Project Greenlight in a conversation with her without remembering that it was her interview. Welcome to Pop Culture Happy Hour, Danielle.
Thank you, Linda. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so what we're doing, we asked a bunch of people that we wanted to talk to what pop culture things were on their minds and what they wanted to talk about. You mentioned something that we have talked about on our show, too, which is the ABC series American Crime.
Yes.
This is not American Crime Story.
Please don't confuse the two.
So what would be your thumbnail description of American Crime?
I think American Crime it's kind of an ensemble effort to pinpoint a specific public ill and go deep on it, like kind of deep dive. So the first season did kind of a deep dive on, I guess you would say, racism in general.
Right.
But it ended up being all these little satellite stories about religion and culture and family and the military.
Because the main thrust of that first season started with a murder story.
Yes.
And then fanned out from there.
Exactly. And I kind of like that. And the second season is kind of the same way, where it starts out with this central conceit of a crime. Then the crime is that a young boy has been raped.
Right.
And he goes to a very exclusive private school, and it's kind of a controversy. But that has since, in the recent weeks, without giving spoilers, given way to a completely different story.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, and I think it is tough to do without spoiling it, but the initial story, which is this idea of a boy being raped by another boy, was so unusual and delicate to me and was being handled so delicately. And then it moves into this other story, which I think they've executed beautifully, but at the same time, I kind of missed the light touch of that, the sort of the slow unraveling of that first story, because I now feel like this other story has kind of taken it over. How did you feel about that shift?
I felt the same exact way, in that never in my life have I said this, or probably will ever say it again, but I kind of felt like, well, can we go back to the rape? You know, there was a real story to tell there. There was something that I think was interesting, and it compels the character and kind of propels him to a certain action. I hope they will explain later in the season. But I really felt like the actor was doing such a tremendous job emotionally conveying kind of the conflict that he was having.
Right. This is Connor Jessup, young actor who I suspect is going to be on a bunch of lists next year for various things. Yeah, he's wonderful.
Absolutely fantastic. And so he does that cry face. I've been watching a lot of Sons of Anarchy, and I've noticed that when Katie Sagal cries, all she does is move her lower lip. And he does a really intense and impressive cry face that's very serene. And he's very evocative, and he's interesting to watch. Yeah. And I think that his acting, along with Lily Taylor, who plays his mother, she kind of goes to a heightened level of emotion instantly. She goes from 0 to 20 in every scene. But it pairs well together. I think they play well off each other. And it was very, not sad, but I guess it was interesting to see that the story's taken a turn.
Yeah. I sort of feel like when you say Lily Taylor, I feel like I want to say National Treasure Lily Taylor. And there's a whole bunch of people in this cast. It's National Treasure Felicity Huffman, National Treasure Timothy Hutton, National Treasure Regina King. And Regina King won an Emmy for this show last year when I felt like it wasn't getting as much attention as it. I feel like this season has gotten more talk around it than the last one.
And I wonder about that, because I thought that Regina King especially was phenomenal last season. She absolutely deserved to get that award.
Right, sure.
But she had more presence, and she was more of a main character, whereas this season she plays the mother of another high school student, and I think she kind of takes the back seat sometimes and not really necessarily expressing her full range. I was lucky enough to talk with her a few months ago, and she has mentioned that that part of her career has been very intentional, that she's taken more of a back seat to acting and is kind of pushing herself towards directing more But yeah, she was fantastic last season. Her husband is Andre Benjamin this season, as you may know as Dre 3000 from the rap group Outkast. He's also brings kind of an interesting flair. And what I like is that they made this family and these parents affluent Black people.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, one of the things about the first season was that it really seemed like race was really so much a foregrounded issue.
Right.
In
a very cliched way.
Yeah, I mean, in a way that I do feel like, at least the part of that season, I didn't see all of that season, but in the part that I saw, a lot of it had to do with kind of Felicity Huffman as a white lady who was afraid of Black people because of kind of where she had raised her kids. And it was that kind of story about race. Whereas this season, race is still very much part of this story because in addition to the kid who is being accused of the rape, who is a white kid, there is also a Black kid. And I think that Regina King character is so cognizant of the effect of him getting embroiled in the criminal justice system and how different it is for him if that happens.
Yes.
So it's a little bit more of a angled take that doesn't go quite as directly at that issue, it seemed to me. Which
I like. I don't know if you like that or not, but I like that they took kind of a side road in to a typical problem, which is that a lot of Black families raise Black children, myself included, in a way that you're kind of always on guard and you're kind of always feeling like you can do something wrong that will impact your life in a disastrous way in the way that maybe it wouldn't for other children who are not Black.
Right.
So I think that the way that they talk about it is so fascinating because they have pull. I mean, these are established people. These are architects and they run businesses and they're established in their town as professionals, and yet they still have this inherent fear about who and what their child could be and how the system impacts him. And I thought that was wonderful. I thought that was nice. Again, the light touches of this season that you pointed out that I think work well in more than one way.
There is so much going on this season in terms of the class conflict between all of these people, because Lily Taylor is, the parent who, she's a single mom. She sends her son to this private school, and he is on financial aid, and his perception and her perception is that people look down on them because he's there on financial aid, whereas you have these other kids who are kind of paying the full freight. And so even though they're inside of this very Tony private school, there's all this class business that's going on between all of these people.
His main social group is outside of the school. He has a girlfriend and
who goes to public school.
Yeah. And you get the impression, I believe they say in one of the earlier episodes, but that this is a new experience for him, that he just started at this school.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot riding on it for him. His mother works in a diner, so she's constantly, they live in a small apartment. They show different cultural spaces. And they show different types of parenting because she's a single mom and she's working really hard to show her son this different side of life that she thinks will give him a leg up, and it kind of ends up demolishing his life.
One of the things that I think is so interesting about his position at school is that he is very much intersecting with, but is not part of, sports culture at school.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And there's a whole piece of this story. Timothy Hutton is playing the basketball coach, and there's a ton of this story that has to do with his relationship with, his ability to influence, his inability to influence, in certain cases, the kids on the basketball team. And sort of the weird, in a way, they worship him, and in another way, they kind of write him off if they don't like what he's telling them to do. So there's a lot of stuff about sports and school sports.
From my own experience, I think they get it spot on pretty much, which is that athletes have this idea that they are, because they are widely revered and they are constantly praised, and they have this idea that sports and what their ability to do in sports is more important than who they are as people or how they conduct themselves in the school. And so it's interesting to see the coach being dismissed because he then tries to take that power shift and flip it on Felicity Huffman, who's like the school principal.
She's yeah,
it's interesting in a gendered way, and then also in just kind of an interesting sports culture way, that when he can't exert that much effort and power over his own team, when they don't take him seriously, he instantly tries to take down the next woman next to him, just like whoever's closest that he can throw some shade at. And she is way more powerful than he is, but it's interesting to see those dynamics play out too, because I think that something that really surprised me when I was in college is how much college sports coaches get paid. The college basketball coach at URI when I was at University of Rhode Island was getting paid more than the president of the school.
Oh, yeah. I think think that's quite common,
Yeah.
is my understanding.
So you can see how that kind of his own relationship to his own power is really influenced by the culture of the town and the school who give him that, like, imbue him with so much power.
Right.
He's fascinating. And I like the elder Timothy Hutton.
I think for people who are younger, they're not as aware of this young Timothy Hutton in like Ordinary People and all this other stuff. And then he he always acted.
Yeah.
But he sort of faded after he did all this kind of young dude stuff. But it's like, it does feel to me like this is Timothy Hutton 2.0 kind of moving into this, because one of the things that I think makes this show so interesting is that they, like American Horror Story and Fargo and some of these others, it's an anthology series, which means they pick up a new story, new characters, but like American Horror Story, but less so like Fargo, they're using a lot of the same actors.
Right.
From season to season. And particularly with Felicity Huffman, it was really interesting to me to see that in both cases, I think of her as a really sympathetic actress in a lot of ways. And in both cases, she's played like really difficult, not very sympathetic, I would say, especially this season.
Right.
Not a very likable lady.
Not at all. I think that they made her physically less appealing in the first season, where you can kind of, because I always equate her with this kind of elegance.
Yes.
And that was really shocking in kind of a good way, where I felt like, oh, good, like they're not going to just kind of bank on the way a character looks to tell the story.
Right.
But this season especially, she's kind of vile. She makes really horrible choices that greatly affect the lives of her students. And it's interesting to see where she puts her, where her allegiance lies, because you kind of expect that someone so kind of put together and prim and proper would make the right choice, and the right choice being the obvious choice.
Yeah.
And she doesn't always do that. And then Timothy Hutton, I feel like he's had kind of an actress's career. I don't know if that's a fair assessment.
It's very interesting. Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, women generally get to be kind of young and cute and have more power when they are in Hollywood when they're younger. They have more, not more power necessarily, but more cachet and a little bit more room to maneuver when they're younger. And then they age out because no one's writing roles for women who are 40 or 50. And so I think Timothy Hutton's kind of had that kind of career where he was a very specific kind of pretty.
Sure.
And then as he aged, he didn't get ugly. He just got not as young and pretty.
Right. He just got older.
He just got older. And I think he had to kind of wait till he grew into his adult face to come back to a show like this and be able to have the gravitas to carry off these kinds of stories.
Yeah. One of the other things that I think is fascinating to me about this show is that it underscores one of the things that serialized television can be really good at, which is stories about institutions.
Yes.
Which is also really what The Wire was. And this story in particular starts off so small, starts off really as about these individual people, this individual kid. And then ultimately, the whole Felicity Huffman part of this story is about people who become so beholden to institutions, in this case, the school. You get the feeling she knows is the right thing to do.
Exactly. You can see it in her eyes almost, where you could see it in her face, where she's kind of wrestling with decisions constantly. And, having to kind of present one face to the public and then turn around within 5 seconds and present a completely different face privately, where she looks devastated and she looks horrified at what she's just had to do. The focus on institutions is, I think, what will give this show some longevity, even though it didn't really get a lot of viewers, I think, in the first season. I hope that it gets renewed and that it has some life, because it really, in the same way that The Wire did, it really is poking at the sore spots.
Right.
And I think that we need that in pop culture. Not everything can be the anti-hero focused, male kind of show. I think we need more options to discuss culture in our TV.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Danielle Henderson, I am so glad we got to chat about American crime. I appreciate so much you coming in.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Where is the best place to find you right now?
My Twitter handle is Knotty Yarn, KNOTTYYARN. And you can find me on my website, which I update pretty regularly, daniellehenderson.net.
Full episodes of Pop Culture Happy Hour are available every Friday on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts, or at npr.org.